The arrogance of man is thinking nature is in our control, and not the other way around. Let them fight.
Don't act like a big shot, Kip. You just got the...
You have your fear, which might become reality. And you have the zone, which is reality.
And welcome back to another episode of the Sludgecast Monster Movie Stomp Down. We are back again. Sludge here.
Mark here.
And Reed Rubin.
Right on. So we, of course, with the last episode, we continued on with the Gamera trilogy. We got one more of those. So this episode, we're moving right along into the next Godzilla film. So something we decided to do on this part of the show is we were going to work our way chronologically in order from the first Godzilla film to... By the time we get there, who knows which one's going to be out because we got several coming. So, but we're just going to work through them all. So we're back to the Godzilla films this time, and the last one we did was Godzilla Raids Again. But now we are back for the great monster mashup of King Kong versus Godzilla.
King Kong versus Godzilla, heading for their colossal collision, shattering every obstacle that stands between them in the most fantastic rampage of annihilation ever recorded on film. See King Kong stamp Tokyo into the ground, holding a beautiful girl in his grasp. See Godzilla destroy an entire army. See King Kong trapped by the blazing barrier of 1 billion volts. But nothing, nobody can stop the great showdown when King Kong and Godzilla meet to fight for survival of the fittest.
This one is super, super fun. But before we get into that one, I do want to discuss and bring up, because obviously this movie came out in 1962. We've got them facing off again in a year, 2020, almost, year and a half. We'll be seeing them on screen. So we're legendary. Of course, brought back Godzilla in 2014, brought Kong back 2016. We've got the next Godzilla movie coming out next year, King of the Monsters, which is going to be absolutely epic. But following that, to close out, as far as we know, with the current contract, they may change it, but they will be closing out the Monsterverse with Kong versus Godzilla, which is now finally started principal photography. It's being filmed under the title Apex, and they started in Hawaii, I believe, filming this movie. So we get to see him again on screen. I know as a kid, I absolutely loved seeing Kong and Godzilla duke it out. It's probably one of my favorite fight scenes. Movie-wise, it's not one of my favorite Godzilla films, but it was just fun. You know, I loved this movie. And obviously, as we went through, we watched both. Well, Mark, just the English version you watched, right?
Yeah, I just watched that.
Then me and Ruben watched the Japanese version, so we'll discuss both of them because there are differences. But at first, let's jump into it. Let's talk about the history of this movie. This movie actually did not start out as King Kong versus Godzilla. This movie actually started out 2 years prior from Willis O'Brien. Willis O'Brien, of course, is who gave us Kong in 1933. He handled all the special effects for that. He created the look of Kong. Kong was his baby, pretty much. And with the success of all the giant monster films, and especially the success that Ray Harryhausen was seeing at the time with his stop-motion animation films, Willis O'Brien wanted to bring Kong back. So Willis actually worked on a screenplay, a storyline of Kong versus Frankenstein. Wanted to bring another big titular character for Kong to fight, to have a good monster mash, and he thought Frankenstein would be great. And in his original story play for that, it wasn't the man Frankenstein monster. It was a monster made up of different animal parts. So instead of a human Frankenstein monster, we got an animal Frankenstein monster. And he created the screenplay and took the screenplay to RKO Pictures, who at the time when he took it to them was no longer the big name that they were. They were more just a distribution house than anything else as far as distributing movies. So there was no real financial backing. So what they did was they told Willis to go to a producer named John Beck, who ended up producing King Kong vs. Godzilla, and took him the idea. Well, at that point, John pretty much stole the movie from Willis. This is where the movie was taken away from Willis's hands. John worked on the screenplay a little bit, changed the name from King Kong versus Frankenstein to King Kong versus Prometheus. I think at one point they even called it King Kong versus the Ginkgo or something like that. But so they made some slight changes. But what Willis didn't know was that John was shopping it around Hollywood, this idea of Kong versus Prometheus, behind his back. Wasn't getting any bites, so then Toho stepped in. And Toho was all for getting Kong. You know, they were had good success with their giant monster movies at the time. Obviously, the 2 Godzilla films. You got Mothra. Rodan, I think, was out too at the time. Then Varan. So they were seeing a lot of success with the tokusatsu genre. So they were all for buying King Kong. But they decided instead of doing him versus a Frankenstein monster, they wanted to pit him against Godzilla because the 30th anniversary for the studio was coming up at the time. So they decided to go ahead and buy it. They spent like $200,000 for the rights, brought it over there. At this point, Willis is completely out. The whole picture's been kind of stolen from him, which was kind of a crap move, but we still got Kong vs. Godzilla either way. So they bring it over, and Toho's all for it. They want to do it. They changed the screenplay up a little bit from what Beck had originally planned, and of course we get to see Kong and Godzilla duke it out. They did think at one point of doing stop-motion animation, but then of course realized too expensive, just going to do Man in the Suit. And of course Eiji Tsuburaya was all for this because he created Man in the Suit, plus King Kong is why he started doing films anyways. So for him, you can really imagine this being like a dream child movie for Eiji. Because, I mean, he's putting up his creation Godzilla against why he started movies with King Kong. So they started production on the film. They ended up releasing the film, of course, in 1962, and it was a huge success. It actually, including inflation, is still the highest grossing Godzilla film in Japan to date. In 1962, it sold almost 13 million tickets. And with inflation today, again, it's still, even above Shin Godzilla, it's the highest selling Godzilla film ever for them. It did extremely well over here. Now, one of the things I want to talk about when it came over here is, of course, you know, RKO Pictures picks it up because they've got the rights for it in America. They got the rights to reshoot or change things in the movie. So we see a huge difference as far as the editing of the film, the soundtrack of the film, and then, of course, the dubbing in some scenes. So they took out a lot of stuff from the Japanese movie. One thing that we definitely noticed the difference was a lot of the storyline from Tako, the TV company producer, who sends them off to the island to get Kong. A lot of scenes of why he does what he does, or is doing what he's doing, or sending them to get Kong, has been removed to make place for those that news type show. You know, where they bring people on, a guy on, and they decided to go that route with it. And what's funny is they did that based off of what Tako really would. I mean, it was a TV station, so they did the whole show to replace that and kind of put it together. They of course changed a lot of editing. The Godzilla.
And actually, that's a change truthfully, that I didn't really mind. I like, you know what? I think I like what they did with him with the American version versus the Japanese. He was a little silly in the Japanese version.
I completely agree with you. He was silly in the American one too, but
not that he wasn't silly in the American, but he was really silly in the Japanese one.
Oh, unbelievable! He went nuts in a lot of stuff. Just, I mean, when Godzilla first appears, he's ripping up newspapers and throwing them around on his desk at one point because all the newspapers are showing Godzilla, and he's still trying to find a monster on an island and just losing his mind. He was very, very over the top. So they changed a lot of scenes like that, and it definitely helped with the pacing. My biggest complaint as far as between the two was the soundtrack changes. Now, when it came over here, they removed a lot of the Japanese, almost all of the Japanese soundtrack.
I thought they removed all of it.
That may be all of it. They may even be.
Yeah.
Because they pulled stuff from Creature from the Black Lagoon and The Invisible Man, like a lot of older, Universal stuff.
Yeah, Frankenstein Frankenstein, the Wolfman. Meets the Wolfman. Yeah.
Yep, pull music from it.
But one of the things though that I find amusing is, even though I love the Japanese soundtrack, I loved when they played the Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Oh yeah,
theme. It's what I call it. When Godzilla comes up, he goes, "Oh, he's," and that just hit me. And I kind of like that.
I I love the American soundtrack better, minus one thing. This movie was, in the Japanese version, was the first movie we were introduced to Akira Fukube's Godzilla March. That famous musical score from Godzilla showed up from here on out actually started in King Kong vs. Godzilla. We didn't get that in the American version. They took it out.
Right. Yeah, but it was, I did notice it was there, but it's not I guess it's a little different than the one we get to hear later on. I guess he made some changes to it.
Yeah, he did.
Anyway.
Yeah, it was very much almost seemed like it was even in the lower key in this one.
Yes, I'm like, you know what? It sounds just like it, but it's just different enough for me to say that's not it.
Right. Yeah,
but it was real close. Yeah,
he evolved it definitely. So, but we got the changes. It happens with the American ones. I think overall, the American production was a better film, but we got to see a lot of cool things happen with this movie. Of course, one thing we got to see was the return of Akihiko Hirata, Dr. Serizawa from the Godzilla 1954 film. He returned. He was another doctor, Dr. Shigezawa, in this movie. But then we also saw the appearance of Kenji Sahara. Kenji Sahara was the prime minister in this film. He went on to be in 11 Godzilla movies, and this was his first appearance. So we got a real big actor. Of course, then another tidbit that some people listening might not know, but the character Fumiko in this movie was, I cannot remember her name. It's May something. She went on to be a James Bond girl in one of the James Bond films, but she started her career in this movie. So whenever you see Fumiko, she's a Bond girl, which was pretty cool. Then, of course, Haruo Nakajima comes back as Godzilla, and we get to see Shoichi. Ruben, you know what I'm talking about? His name? What's his last name? The guy plays Kong.
Oh, you got me. You're going to want me to pronounce the name that
Shiochi Hirose, I think, something like that. Shiochi. But the guy who plays Kong, he was in a lot of tokusatsu films. He was actually in Godzilla Raids Again. He was one of the convicts in that. He was a fighter jet pilot in Rodan. He was in Baron. He was in Mysterians. So he's been in a lot of the Toho stuff. But I think what was bigger for him than playing Kong was he was King Ghidorah. So when Ghidorah, Theory of a Monster, and Monster Zero came out, Shiochi played Ghidorah in those movies because he was a bigger guy. I mean, because where Haruo didn't quite fill out the Godzilla suit, Shiochi really filled out that Kong suit. He was big, and which went great for him playing Ghidorah later on down the line, a few movies later. So a lot of cool stuff happened. One of the cool things, and something that really went on for this movie that a lot of people talked about and was kind of a myth, and it really is just a myth, was that there was two endings to the film. Then the Japanese version, Godzilla wins, and then the Kong version, or the American version, Kong wins. Well, that's absolutely not true. There's only one ending to the film. But that actually started in an article from Famous Monsters back in the day. Famous Monsters, back when, I think it was...
I think Famous Monsters is just referring to, they took the audio of Godzilla's roar out.
Right, yeah. They'd done that where in the Japanese ones it's there. That started that whole myth that really went on for decades. Because before we started being able to get the Japanese films imported to America, those, the 60s and 70s and into the 80s, most Americans didn't have access to the Japanese version. We had just the American release. So many people.
I didn't get to see the Japanese version till recently. And that's just thanks to you. Otherwise, I mean, I don't own a copy of the Japanese. 'Cause
I think I ended up ordering. Yeah, because I got it on the Plex. That's right, because you got the Plex server.
Yeah, it's on the Plex. So
man,
that's the only reason I got to see the Japanese version.
I got to have them both.
Yeah. I've got. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Ruben.
I mean, I own the American version in several formats, but I've never had the Japanese version. So, I didn't get to see it till, like I said, maybe in the last year or so.
Yeah, I bought it. Got it on import. I want to say 4 or 5 years ago was when I finally got to see the Japanese version. So it's not been too long. But I knew there was differences. And for those who are listening, I actually have a Plex server. And what Plex is pretty much like your own personal Netflix. So I've got a massive server computer that's got several terabytes of movies on it. And I do have the entire Godzilla collection, English version, Japanese version, even some rare dubs that are hard to find, and Ruben's got access to them, so he gets to watch it from Texas, and we're over here in Tennessee, and I shared that with him, so he gets to see all the cool stuff that's kind of hard to find, because I've worked hard. I got to have, even though I don't watch most of the English versions, there are a few I do watch, but I mainly watch the Japanese. There's still some I need. You know what I mean? Like Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. I think there should be, if not I need to fix it, there should be 3 versions of it on my Plex server. I've got the original Japanese version. I've got the classic media, or the more recent, was it Kraken releasing Blu-ray version, so that English dub. But then back in the 60s when it first came out, or the 70s, I'm sorry, there was a company called Titra, Titra, who did the original dubbing for it, and most fans still feel that the dubbing for that they did was the best dubbing for that movie, and it was very hard to find a non-VHS version because it doesn't exist. And a fan had a year or two ago, I found out, had gotten the high def version of the movie. Then he imported it and took out the audio and imported the Titra dubbing from a VHS copy, remastered it, and released it. So managed to get my copy on a true high def Godzilla vs. Sea Monster with the original Titra dubbing, and it's epic. It's so cool. So, but
I remember you told me about that. I still hadn't sat and watched it, but
man, it's so good. It's just one of those things too. I mean, as fans.
And it's funny, when I bought this last version on DVD, I bought it thinking it was going to have the Japanese version on it, because you look at the minutes and it matched the Japanese version. And I'm like, ooh, this is going to have the Japanese version on it. Then I got it home, and it was a misprint. It was not. It was 91 minutes.
Oh,
it said it was 98. Yeah, and I'm like, wait a minute,
Yeah, to my knowledge,
that's not what the printing says.
For Kong vs. Godzilla, still to this date, is the only Godzilla film that has not seen a Japanese release to American shores.
That is correct. I
didn't know that.
When I watched it, I said, now, why don't I have this? There's got to be a reason. So I started poking around, and I found out, well, it's because it doesn't exist unless you import it.
It's the only way you can get it.
And, and so, and I don't know why. Like I said, when I bought this last one, I looked up the specs, and I saw the minutes, and I got excited, thinking, okay, this is it. And then when I got it home, I popped it in, and nope, it was the American. I'm like, they just didn't release it. All the other ones, you choose. You put in the DVD or the Blu-ray, and it tells you, okay, which one you want to watch. Right. And this is the only one I have that doesn't give you the choice. It just starts right up, with the classic.
I think it's the same. I got the Blu-ray version of that. The same way. I mean, I had to take my import version and put it on my server so that I can have both versions, because it just doesn't. It's the only one. Every other film has been brought over here English and Japanese except for that one. It maybe have to do something with the universal rights too. It's who knows. One day it would be great. To get a release with both of them. So we just recently got Godzilla 1984, which was huge, because that was the last Godzilla film to be brought over here that's not been or the Japanese version other than King Kong vs. Godzilla.
Yeah, exactly. That one for the longest time was, I'd see it on eBay or something, and I'd say, hey, now what? And, oh, well, it's a Laserdisc transfer, or it's whatever. It was never a true copy,
Nope.
And then so I was happy to see it.
Oh, it was super nice.
But I've also liked to see the American version released on Blu-ray, which I don't think there is.
if I'm not
Godzilla
mistaken,
85.
yes, that one. I know we're kind of getting sidetracked here, but with that one, we will never see that one in a high def.
Really?
Because, from my understanding, the license for that would technically be. I don't know if it'd be. No one technically has the license for that now, or that license has been lost through the
Really?
years. Yeah. When New World Pictures went bankrupt, Star Pictures bought the rights to a couple Godzilla films that New World had, being Godzilla vs. Gigan and Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla and Godzilla 1985. Then Star Maker went bankrupt in the late 1990s, and
Okay.
where the licensing went from there is unknown. So they're just
That's
gone.
crazy. You think? Oh man, I didn't think that was possible.
Yeah, I
thought
neither.
it
So I mean,
was a public domain or something. Like a lot of this stuff goes public domain when it's not licensed.
yeah. So they would have to go through. They would have to go through legally trying to hunt that license down to see who would technically own it, get that license back. Then the even harder part for that movie is finding an actual transfer, an actual original complete film.
Yeah, that would be.
Yeah,
that would
which
be-
is
I mean,
yeah.
Not that I don't enjoy the 84, but I'd like to see the 85.
Oh man,
Yes.
I would love to have a Blu-ray of 85. So hey, but I'll be working on that soon in the near future. Stay tuned on that one.
There you
But,
go.
but so, anyways, back to Kong versus Godzilla. We got a little sidetracked on that one.
Yeah.
So this was for me as a kid. We'll go through like we normally do, what we liked, what we didn't like. I know normally I try to go last or something. I'll go first on this one. For me, what I loved about this film was seeing Kong and Godzilla go. I mean, it's definitely the worst looking Kong ever. Even the suit for King Kong Escapes, which had nothing to do with this film, Toho just still had the rights for Kong, and that actually was a film based off of the Hanna-Barbera cartoons that came out back in the 60s.
Yeah.
That suit looked way better than this one, but it was a rough suit, and I really don't know if that was a struggle for Aiji because Kong is why, that's why he did movies and special effects, but pretty rough suit, but the suit was able to do a lot and handle a lot, which was good. I remember watching this as a young kid. Just seeing those two on screen together was amazing. And I was always pro Godzilla. Even watching the American version, I was like, Godzilla got away. He got away. He survived. It wasn't just Kong was the winner. But I understood it's King Kong. He was bigger at the time than Godzilla, and he had a longer history. And so, I got it. But, I absolutely enjoyed it. One of the things that I liked, and even as a kid, and I didn't really verify till later on in life, that a lot of people were like, Kong doesn't have electrical powers. That was actually a throwback to the original idea for the film. They kept that because the Frankenstein monster got his powers from electricity. So they kept that there from the original screenplays that Willis O'Brien had worked out before Godzilla came on board. So I thought that was cool. Plus, to me, when you have Godzilla and Kong, Kong needs something.
Well, he was down and out until the electrical storm hits. Godzilla was burning him up and getting ready to take care of finish him, and then here comes the electrical storm, and which changes the whole fight.
The entire tide of that just completely changes. I loved it. I loved the characters. I thought they were fun. They were exciting. Even Taco. He's kind of that annoying but character that's enjoyable. Fumiko, everybody I thought was a great cast. I can't complain about the storyline because it's a monster versus monster movie. They made it work. They couldn't take Kong down. They couldn't take Godzilla down. The only option was let them duke it out and hopefully they destroy themselves. But one of the things I liked about this one especially was this was definitely the turning point for Godzilla. This whole tokusatsu Showa generation of the monster versus monster movies that we'd see from here on out, this was really the pivotal turning point. I know a lot of people talk about, Godzilla really didn't become a good guy till Ghidorah. I agree, but the turning point to where these movies went all started here. So I absolutely loved it. I loved the fight sequence, man. I mean, I could watch that over and over and over again. Even my son, he loves it. We were watching the Japanese version earlier tonight in the car, and he's like, Dad, fast forward to the fight scene. Dad, I want to see him fight. I want to see him fight, because it's great. I mean, you see him fight twice. Well, first time they meet up, Godzilla blows his radiation, his ray at him, and Kong's like, I don't want none of this, and it's like, no, negative. And there was a lot of stuff I liked about, too, when Kong comes to Tokyo. His getting Fumiko off the train and holding her over that on top of that building. There was a lot of really cool throwbacks to Kong, the movie, that I really, really enjoyed. That stayed true to the character that I liked. The one thing I know that's been an argument for the new Kong versus Godzilla that's coming out is his size. In this one, 1962. They didn't even try. There was no attempt at why Kong was the size he was, because the original Kong was like 30 feet tall. They just went with it. They're like, we know who's watching this. They ain't going to care. We'll just make him the same size. That fight scene especially, man, I mean, there was things I didn't like about the film. Again, between the two, there was a lot of the soundtrack from the original one, especially the Godzilla March, that I wish they'd have kept. But again, Creature from the Black Lagoon soundtrack was great. I mean, I loved it, and what pitfalls I do have with it would honestly boil down just to Kong, the look of Kong. I thought it was a pretty rough suit. Now, there's a couple things with Godzilla's suit. While I love the reptilian design on it, was a little too big and made things a little too awkward looking for me in some scenes. But man, when that last fight scene shows up, it makes up for anything I didn't like prior to it. And with that movie, I mean, don't really fast forward anything. And, when I put Kong vs. Godzilla in, I'll start it and I'll finish it all the way, because I think it's a pretty good film. I don't rank it high up there in the top 5, or even, well, it's definitely top 10, but I wouldn't put it in the top 5 of my favorite or best Godzilla films, but it's in the top 10 for sure. And I think it was huge because, again, we've talked about it's the highest selling Godzilla film of all time in Japan. But that battle, to me, that battle at the end, I love so much, because I feel like we didn't see a battle like that until Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. It was so frantic and intense, and just you see them, and it's like you watch Godzilla fight other monsters after this, and it's like he's got to stop this monster from doing what he's doing. He's got to stop Ghidorah, or he's got to stop the sea monster, or Hedorah. This one, it really felt like he wanted to kill Kong, and Kong wanted to kill Godzilla. It was just a brute fight, and super fast, super intense, great action with it. And I feel like I didn't get that again until 1974 with Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. That last fight between those two it takes me back to Kong vs. Godzilla, because it's so intense. No holds barred. You got two monsters that absolutely despise each other, and they want to kill each other off. So the intensity, to me, is one of the reasons why I love this movie so much. Again, things I didn't like, wasn't too much. I mean, 1962, special effects were great for the time. Some soundtrack changes I kind of wasn't big on. The editing I liked a lot better in the American version, but there wasn't a whole lot. It was just enjoyable. The movie, to me, was a very enjoyable film. Very much fun, yeah.
So was like with the scene with the octopus, he grabs a couple of the islanders. Is that the 1962 version of CG back then?
Oh no, that was
or was that claymation type?
Well, there is slight. I mean, and it's just one brief moment where there's actually stop motion in that fight sequence.
Yeah. I think it's animation. Isn't it animation?
Yeah, it's stop motion animation. Yeah. So that octopus, that was what little stop motion animation I usually got to do was in that scene with the octopus. And for those who are listening, when you go back and if you watch the movie, Kong's never in stop motion, but the octopus itself is.
Well, the scene where he has her in his hand and she starts to slide out of his hand, I think that's stop motion there, isn't it? Something you have to check.
I'll check. No, because I think that was puppetry, if I'm mistaken.
Well, that could have been.
But I will check.
Yeah, because I read they use puppetry, suits, and animation as in somebody graphically drew it in, like those missiles. They shoot those missiles. They shoot Well, they look like missiles. That was animation. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, and some of that stuff.
Yeah.
They went pretty across the board, real full on the special effects on this one. I mean, even with the octopus, there was so much there because you had the claymation octopus, you had, of course, the real one, which it was said that the octopus that was used, Aizu Tsuburaya ended up taking home and eating for dinner, because he was a big fan of eating octopus. So apparently that one that one definitely got taken down. But then of course you had a puppet maquette version, like when Kong's got it on his head. And then you got the different animation through it. You got the puppetry from Godzilla and Kong. They really, I think, try to do that. I mean, they did. They go went above and beyond for this film because it's Kong versus Godzilla. Yeah. I mean, it's the eighth wonder of the world versus the king of the monsters. So it's absolutely huge. Ruben, what about you? What did you like and dislike about the film?
Well, I'm kind of like you. The only thing I disliked, which I didn't dislike it that much, because was Kong's suit. But at the same time, it's very Japanese. That makes any sense? Yeah. So really, I didn't expect it to be what the claymation was going to be. And then I think it took out the time. And it was the 1960s. So so I expected the guy in the suit from a Japanese monster movie, and it looked very Japanese to me. Like, okay, this is something they would do. So it didn't bother me, but at the same time, that is the weakest part of the movie compared to Godzilla's suit. If you want to compare to Godzilla's suit, with it, there is no comparison.
No, that suit was great.
Godzilla's suit is way better. But that's the only thing. I mean, I didn't really mind the soundtrack at all. Like I told you, I'm a big Universal Monster fan, so hearing the Creature from the Black Lagoon soundtrack didn't bother me, and hearing the Frankenstein meets the Wolfman soundtrack didn't bother me, because I'm a huge fan of those movies, so I was okay with it. But that said, watching the Japanese version and listening to that soundtrack, I see what you're saying. We're missing out on a great soundtrack because of that, and it's substituted with a great soundtrack. But it's still, like I said, both soundtracks are great, and but I think either way, we'd be missing out, because I just loved, like I told you earlier, I just loved it when they, when they tried to trap Godzilla and they and then he just breaks through, and it's that theme from Creature from the Black Lagoon. I'm like,
yeah,
it's awesome.
It was so perfect. Him come out of that pit, loved it.
Yeah, when he came out of that pit, it was Creature from the Black Lagoon playing the theme playing in the background. I was like, oh man, this is awesome. So that's the King Kong suit's the only weakness I saw. I did see that the special effects weren't as good as it could have been, as far as, I think that in Godzilla Rates Again and in Godzilla 54, the original, they took a lot more care with the buildings, and I think we talked about it in previous episodes, camera angles. So a lot of it has to do with directors. They weren't there like they were in the past film, and it was noticeable. But at the same time, this film was meant to be just fun. You had King, and I agree with you also. This is the point where, instead of Godzilla being the heavy, I guess you'd say it, you find yourself rooting for him. Like, I root for Godzilla. Every time. And as a matter of fact, in speaking of this movie, I understand that Kong was bigger and he was supposed to be the hero. But if you watch this movie, really, neither one, was if you ask me, Godzilla got more hits in, and I always have this discussion with people online, because it's, oh no, well, Kong won. Toho said so. And I'm like, I've never seen that anywhere. I've never seen the press release. This is what I always get. Well, Toho had a press release that Kong won, and my first question is, why have I never seen this press release? I've never seen it. Have you?
No, it doesn't exist. Doesn't exist.
Yeah, it doesn't exist. I'm like, show me that press release.
The bottom line of the ending of the film, when it comes to Kong swimming off back to Faroe Island, and then of course in the American version you don't get his roar, you do in the Japanese. The reason why that was done that way was solely because Kong was a bigger name, and RKO put more money into it. That's it. There was no.
Well, I also read that RKO stipulated they wouldn't give the rights of Kong to Toho unless Kong won.
Correct. Yeah.
That's what,
it was.
Words. Yeah, you can have Kong. Yeah.
Not that he won, but that he wasn't defeated. So that's why.
He wasn't defeated.
Correct.
And that's what I read. So Toho's answer was, let's just make it a draw.
Yep.
They both fall into the ocean, and that's it. And of course, in the American version, you don't hear the roar at the end.
And they've even talked that today. I mean, there was a recent interview with Adam Wingard, who's directing Kong vs. Godzilla. And he had talked about it. Other people, I mean, I think even Steve Rifle and them have talked about it, that there was never a clear-cut winner. There never was. Right. There was no press release, nothing saying this person won or that person won. It was always left to a draw. That Wingard has stated, you're going to get a clear cut this time around, because we never had that.
And that's why, that's what I like. I was like, look, I'll call it a draw. I'm happy to call it a draw, but there's that. You know how the Godzilla fandom, or the Kaiju fandom, I should say. No, Kong definitely won, and I'm like, I don't see that, and I'm not going to tell you Godzilla definitely won, because I think it was a draw. I think they fought each other and both fell in the ocean. And
I'm with you. It's a draw. Anyone who argues otherwise, I throw them in the same crew of who shot first, Credo or Han. That's
there you go.
That's what it boils down to, is the same thing. Those ones who are going to sit there and freeze frame every little split second just to see. It was a draw. Great.
And the bottom line is, it really doesn't matter.
No.
Not in the end.
Nope.
I'm like, what does it matter? But this is the first film where I think you called it a turning point, where Godzilla started battling, and maybe he wasn't a good guy in this film, but I'm sure when people sat down and watched this movie, that you had at least some fans rooting for Godzilla and some rooting for Kong.
Oh yeah, I mean, they were definitely taking him away from that horror or that disaster film type deal.
Yeah, exactly.
You look at the kid on the train, when the Godzilla's coming and they're trying to get everybody on the train, and that mom's like, telling that little boy, and what does he say? I want to see Godzilla, mommy.
Godzilla.
Here's a little child who's saying, I'm not afraid of this monster. That, to me, right there was the key point to where Toho was saying, we're changing.
Yeah,
we're going to make him a good guy.
Yep.
Yeah, that's that. I didn't think about that, because I'm so used to kids saying, "Oh, Godzilla," but he basically says he doesn't want to run away. He wants to go see Godzilla.
Yep.
And so that's a turning point for Godzilla. I think after that, he basically becomes a hero rather than just a terror for Japan. So,
right.
But all in all, I liked it because it was a lot of fun. It was fun to watch. It's fun to watch. It's one of those movies. I think I've mentioned in a previous episode, like Godzilla Monster Zero is one of my favorites because it's fun.
Yep.
And this one falls in that category. It's just a lot of fun. And it's a movie that, like, if you were going to introduce your kid, like I told you, Megalon was the one I introduced my kid to, but this one would definitely be in the running for that. If, like, I had some kid that I had to babysit, and he was sitting around bored. King Kong versus Godzilla, the American version, because Godzilla shows up a lot faster, would definitely be a movie I could pop in, because,
I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, it's definitely a movie I could pop in and probably keep their attention.
Yeah, I mean, with Gavin, Gavin's first introduction, my youngest son, to Godzilla was the Hanna-Barbera cartoons when I first started getting. But it's what he would go to sleep to. But the first actual movie was King Kong vs. Godzilla. Was this one? This was the first actual full live action film that he watched, and he loves it.
Yep, I think that's and that's why I call it fun, because even, I mean, like you were talking about Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. that one, the fight was awesome, but it was pretty violent.
Oh yeah, bloody.
Godzilla bled.
Yep.
You know, it was bloody. You know, and it got a little bit more graphic. You know, but you know, the kids nowadays, of course, they've seen probably the worst. But it's not like I would take my 5-year-old and say, "Do you think I'm going to put in Mechagodzilla with with all the blood?" I think I would start with King Kong and let them go through all those.
Right, work their way through it.
Because that one was pretty bloody. I mean, if you think about it, for a kid to see that, that's probably pretty disturbing. So that's what I like about it. And like I said before, the soundtrack and all that didn't really bother me, only because I'm a Universal Monster fan. If I wasn't, it'd probably be a negative. But, you know, otherwise, you know, it's another one of those movies that's a go-to on a cold, rainy December.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah, and it's like one of those movies you throw in. And I don't know if I mentioned this in the past episode or not. If I did, I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself. But
no, it's
that's
okay.
a tradition that's a Christmas vacation tradition for me and RJ. Is you know, even when he was off in elementary or whatever, all the way through, it's like, okay, we're gonna sit here and I always take vacation during Christmas. We're gonna sit here and we're gonna watch Godzilla, you know, with the Christmas tree lights on and
that's
everything.
awesome.
And you know,
yeah, I mean, you started that this year.
You know, yeah, exactly. So that's kind of a tradition, kind of like you had on Godzilla's birthday. You have a tradition that's been ours, you know, and he's we gotta watch Godzilla, Dad. We gotta watch Godzilla, and that's just one of those traditions. Another tradition we have, and it's funny that he would notice, but here in Texas, first cold front comes in, and it's like, man, I got to open all the windows and all the doors. We finally get to, you know, because it gets hot down here, so we have air conditioning on, you know, probably 9 months out of the year down here.
Right.
So, yeah, so he said, I'm coming home. He goes, and I want to watch Halloween with the doors open. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, Dad, didn't you ever notice whenever we watch Halloween, we're watching it and the door's open? Because it's cold out, it's cool outside. The first front come in or whatever, and it's cool. So you have all the windows and doors open. Like, I never thought about that. So that turned into a tradition too.
Nice.
Watching Halloween with the door open. You know, so yeah, it's a very, you know, King Kong, Godzilla, all those movies. You know, they take me back to when RJ was a kid and he was around. So.
And that's
all I got, man. Let's see what Mark has to say.
Yeah.
I'm just staying over here quiet because I'm the third man out. I did not like this movie.
Blasphemy.
This is one of those where I think that you've got King Kong, which is such a historic figure that I thought Toho could have put all out as far as the suit goes. You know, and I'm sitting here and we're watching it as we're talking about it, and I'm watching these fights go on, and it looks like on the Kong suit as he's walking, he has extensions on his arms. They're almost his hands are almost to his ankles, but as soon as he gets into a fight, they shorten right up, and you can tell a difference. So I think as a production company, I would have thought, hey, this is not just any monster. This is King Kong. We need to make this elite. And I didn't think they lost it there. And then I'm, you know, also sitting here watching, as far as the fight scenes we're talking about, all these different fight scenes. I don't know that Godzilla hits King Kong one time with his ray. It's always short. It's always right before
No, he hits him one time.
Yeah. And
does he?
But for all of us Godzilla fans, he would have annihilated him.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, but I'm sorry. He would have just, you know, if he would have been Godzilla and just drilled him with it.
Yeah.
You know, and those are things that I look at because I was being a Godzilla fan over King Kong. Disappointed me. And so I think it could have been done a whole lot better. And so I'm not a fan. It's probably my least favorite Godzilla movie. and it wasn't one you, Chase, as a child, I come up and say, hey, look at this one, because I never did, because I never liked it. So that's pretty much where I'm at.
So, which is a good point, because I mean, I think we can agree with the suit, especially because that's the biggest complaint we all have. I mean, when you even again looking back at King Kong Escapes, that suit was far superior of a suit to this one. So I think they could have done better for that.
And I'm not going to say it's political, but you're looking at Hollywood, RKO Pictures, Toho, and they got to keep it to a point where, hey, you can't outdo my monster type of deal.
That's a good point.
Because
that's an excellent point. I never thought about that.
If you look at that last fight scene, Godzilla tears him up until the electrical storm.
Yep.
And then pretty much all he does is push him into the water, and it's over.
Yeah,
you know?
That's
Godzilla's
true.
whooping up on him. And
so what you're saying is Godzilla 98 was revenge for Godzilla versus King Kong.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Exactly.
That's him going, gotcha.
So, I mean, it is a fun type movie, and for children, you know, it's not bad. But
I think I tend to give it a pass because of that. But you bring up some good points. But I give Toho a pass on it. And maybe I shouldn't after hearing your opinion, but I give them a pass on it because, you know, I'm like, well, it's part of course for them, but I never really thought about it as like, well, we don't want to make it too good, you know.
Right. Well, they even talked with this film. A lot of the original press releasing from Toho itself had the images of the original Kong from '33.
Yes, that's right. I did read that Godzilla FAQ.
Oh yeah, dude, that book's great. Any Godzilla fan needs to get that book. It's awesome. So I mean, so even then, Toho was like, the suit's not the best, you know. So we're gonna promote the original Kong suit on this one. It was definitely a downer, and I think you're right too. Now that I'm trying to go back and play in my head, the only time I think he actually hit him with his breath. Which, and I didn't bring this up, but this movie was another pivotal point when this Atomic Breath was. This is the first time we saw it as blue,
right?
Obviously being color, which was awesome, very vibrant too.
Time you see Godzilla in color,
it looked beautiful. But the only time he actually that I'm aware of, that he actually hits him, and it's not even full on, was their first face to face. Wasn't even the fight, because I'm trying to think of every time in the actual fight. And no, he doesn't. The closest time he comes to it is the tree is in his mouth, and he blows the fire to blow the tree out, and the tree hits Kong and burns him up a little bit.
Hits him in the head.
Or the chest area.
Oh, well. Yeah. Well, then there's one part where Kong brushes his head. There's smoke coming off his head.
Yeah.
And
there's no full-on hit.
No.
Because I think you're right. I mean, that's just going to it would take him out.
Yeah. It would have been a real quick movie.
Yeah,
it would have been a short film, I think, in my opinion.
Everyone's like, why do they do that? Because they need an hour and a half long movie. You know,
we got to get the rest of this stuff in here.
They got to. Which it'll be interesting to see. I mean, you know, because this one is to me, and I think we're all kind of across the board. I mean, it's when I watch it, I usually watch just the last fight scene. But if I will watch it to watch the movie, I'll play it all the way through. I'll skip it. But if I'm like, I want to see something pretty quick, one of my few quick go-tos, because I do have those where I'm like, I just want to see a Godzilla fight. Kong's usually one of those, actually. You know, Kong, Meg Godzilla in 74 is a quick fight that I usually always go to. Those ones that I just it's not a quick fight, but the Godzilla versus Gigan, you know, fight is another go-to for me, where I just want to see almost like the Toho Matsurai collection that they did years ago, where they would take the film and cut out a lot of the human elements and release them with more just the monster stuff. I loved that about those movies, or those versions of it. So I tend to go through those, and Kong's one of those. It's just one of those great fight scenes to me. But suit's rough. It's a rough suit.
Yeah.
But hopefully, obviously, we've got the new one coming up here soon. they rectify that. So, I mean, we've seen Godzilla now and Kong go toe-to-toe in 1962. And there's fan bases across the board of pro-Kong, pro-Godzilla, who wins, who doesn't win. This is all going to culminate for us again. Not just, and what's great is you got a new generation of fans who are going to get to see these, probably even people who's never even seen this movie.
Right.
That are going to get to see the two greatest movie monsters of all time go toe to toe. So it's going to be great. But then you also have my generation, your all's generation. I mean, the generations that were there at the beginning and saw it, they get to see it again. So you get all these generations of people that are going to enjoy this. How do they handle it? What's going? You know, what I mean, they've figured out the size deal. Talked about this on a previous episode. When it comes to him, in Kong Skull Island, he's still a child. He's 100+ feet tall. That's in the 70s. This is, 2020. He's had 50 years to grow. He's going to match the size. Pretty close. I don't think he'll be the exact height, but he's going to be pretty spot on. But it's like, what do we expect from this film? How does it do we? I don't see them giving Kong a special power of any kind.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
they set this Kong up to be brutal.
That's why I think you mentioned it in the last episode here, and we talked about it before. I think it's going to be Godzilla versus King Kong, but I think they're going to end up teaming up. They're going to be guardians, so to speak.
Yeah, there's got to be a big bad, I think.
Yeah, I think that's how it's going to. I think that's my guess. But and who knows? Because are they calling it King Kong versus Godzilla? They're not, are they?
No, it's actually titled Godzilla versus Kong.
It is Godzilla versus Kong. Okay.
Yep.
And they put the verses in there, then But I don't know. Maybe I'm just biased. I just don't see how Kong, in any way, shape, or form, I don't care how big he is, can. I guess he can be faster than Godzilla and avoid the ray.
Yeah, well, I think it's one of those things too. It's how do you decide that? If you look at other titular, huge characters like that, you go to Freddy versus Jason. Which is huge characters. Who do you decide truly wins? Well, neither do.
Yeah.
You look at the end, he cuts Freddy's head off, which that's one of the greatest fight scenes ever. That movie, and just amped me up when I first saw it. But Jason's carrying Freddy's head, and then Freddy winks. He's still there.
Yeah.
I can't help but see them do that.
Yeah, I think you're right. But like I said, with King Ghidorah coming up, and Mothra and Rodan, and I think you're going to have some kind of showdown at the end. It's going to go out with a big bang.
I did too.
You also talked about it. Yeah, I know that when Garth Edwards still was in control there, he wanted to do a Destroy All Monsters. I know I read that somewhere. He wanted to culminate in a Destroy All Monsters type movie. And I still think they're going to follow that formula. But we'll just see if that really happens or not. But as far as Kong versus Godzilla and Kong, I just don't see. They even have to give Kong electrical powers in this one to even have a chance. And all of a sudden, he turned into, I don't know if you guys are wrestling fans, he turned into Hulk Hogan all of a sudden. I don't know if you ever watched wrestling. Hulk Hogan was, I don't know if you ever seen him wrestle. It was the formula that if you watch wrestling, you knew. He was down and out.
Oh, yeah.
And it looked like he was dead. And all of a sudden, I don't know where, he started shaking his head back and forth. And the guy started, whoever it was with the bad guy, started hitting him, and it had no effect. And then he got up, and all of a sudden, he won the match. And that's what happened with this King Kong. All of a sudden, he gets the electrical storm, and then all of a sudden, he's Hulk Hogan, and he leg drops Godzilla.
Do you think that they will use the Kong from Skull Island? Is that the Kong?
Yes,
okay,
yes, that's the Kong.
So we can say it's going to be based on his strengths from that movie.
Well, you've got to add in 50 years difference.
Okay,
so now
because he's an adolescent, he's
a child in that movie. So he'll be an adult come time for this. Now, Wingard has stated that this Kong, when we see Kong, He'll look a little different because, again, it's 50 years later. He was much bigger.
Yeah.
But he's also stated he's much more battle scarred to show that he's gone through a lot more fights from Skull Island to this. I mean, I'm pro Godzilla. 100% of the way. I think he's going to win it. You know, I mean, I do think, again, I think we're in agreement. They'll team up for a bigger monster, thinking it's going to be Ghidorah.
Right.
But that's, we'll see. But I do think if there's ever been a instance or a time, even though we've only had one other time, or a Kong, because we've had multiple Kongs, that could go toe to toe with Godzilla, it would be this one. After watching Skull Island, because his strength, ferocity, his intelligence, and his fighting style, I think he's quick and he uses what's around him.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. Godzilla 2014. Well, all the Godzillas are like that, except for Zilla, which is not Godzilla. Kong is faster, and Godzilla is slow and it's not as agile as Kong would be. So that's why I mentioned, I said, well, I guess he could use the speed and agility.
Right.
Yeah. To get past Godzilla that way.
Well, I think it'll be, it'll boil down to one creature, being Godzilla, is an instinctual creature, where Kong is an intellectual creature. And I think that will be the key to it.
Even in this one, there's that one fight scene. Of course, Godzilla, that's when they drop Kong off, off the helicopter. Kong goes and hides behind a rock and waits.
Oh yeah, that's right.
The corner, where Godzilla is just like, I'm going to go get me some of this, and he just jumps into the fire and goes right at it. While Kong is like, you know what, I'm going to hide behind this rock and I'm going to catch her from behind. Which is what he does. He grabs his tail and goes at it. But so there is that intelligence thing that presumably Godzilla doesn't have. He's more instinctual, like you said. Godzilla just does what he needs to do. And even though fighting the Mutos, he had to use a little bit of intelligence to get past that.
Yep.
Well,
he did. So I wouldn't call him dumb. Yeah, I wouldn't call him dumb, but
he thinks out the when they put the electrical lines in the '62 King Kong.
That's true.
Movie. He sits and looks up and down to make sure which way he needs to go and follow it down.
Yeah. So I mean, there's definitely some intelligence there.
Yeah, he's just not all just raw.
Right. But I think for the majority part of it, when you look at those, comparing the two of them, it'll be interesting. I mean, I don't think. I don't see. That's a hope, fanboy again. I mean, and Ruben was talking about it. I don't see the final fight being Kong versus Godzilla. I see them going to toe, and then I see them coming up because against somebody else. Because again, man, like, where does it go from at this point? So let's say the movie comes out, and then there is no other monster. Which there is. There's other monsters. There's actually even other monsters in King of the Monsters coming out next year that we haven't seen that Doherty's talked about. But let's say it boils down to those two, and we do have a winner. What happens at that point? If King Kong wins, what's the outcome with the fan base? What's the outcome with the movies? I think that pigeonholes you. What happens if Godzilla wins? I don't think with Kong, he doesn't have in today's market as big of a fan base as Godzilla by a drastic long shot. So when you look at the fans of making who's coming to see the movie happy, or unless you want a repeat of '98, in my opinion, you can't let Kong win because when you go back and look at '98, I mean, it was a blockbuster hit because of opening weekend, but then it dropped 72% the next weekend. I mean, that's one of the biggest drops of any film ever, or 78%. It was huge. So if you go in and everyone's hyped up, and you've got the vast majority of people seeing this being Godzilla fanatics, and Godzilla loses, your movie tanks. My thoughts.
Yeah, and that's true, because I was thinking, well, maybe they're going to kill off Godzilla because they're supposed to get the rights back after that.
Yeah, the rights
go back to Toho after that movie. So
for the live actions.
And other, unless it's a self-sacrificial type thing, you know. And I'm trying to think of an example of that where Godzilla basically sacrifices himself. You know, like Star Trek Wrath of Khan, Spock type of thing.
Right, right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So if they do it something like that, then maybe that would work for the fan base. But I think anything short
it's still
of
gonna
that
be
will
rough.
not work.
It's still gonna be
Yeah.
rough for fan base. It's you
Yeah.
you walk out of that movie
Anything
theater
short of that,
and
it's like,
Godzilla's
no.
done. That's that makes it rough.
I mean, to me, the way that if I made the movie, this is how I would see it played out with these two. They would have to go toe to toe at some point because you got to feed the fans. You got to.
Yeah.
And in that first sequence, I would, if I was the film director, if I was making this movie, Kong and Godzilla fight for the first time, I would have Kong come out the victor at that point in the movie. But then, of course, you have a big bad they have got to come together and fight for, and it would be King Ghidorah.
Right.
So Kong goes up against King Ghidorah. Doesn't stand a chance on his own. There's just no way. Godzilla comes because Ghidorah is his ultimate nemesis and puts the difference, their differences aside, and they fight together. But in the process, Kong dies. Godzilla comes out the victor. Ghidorah gets beat.
Okay.
Kong dies. So you've got.
He did. He did state that there was going to be a clear-cut winner in this.
Yep.
One. I think you mentioned earlier. So there will be. He didn't say whether it was going to be King Kong, Godzilla, King Ghidorah. He just said there was going to be a clear-cut winner. We're making the assumption that it's going to be one of the two.
Yeah. Because I think if Kong loses, which I think he will lose in the clear-cut winning, I think he'll lose, but it'll be an honorable loss, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know.
Well, does the title tell you anything? King Kong versus Godzilla. Kong's the main. Godzilla versus King Kong.
Right.
Does that?
Yeah.
I'm not saying it does. I'm just asking a question. Does that play into it?
Yeah.
When you look at, you're going to a movie, it's a Godzilla movie. If it's Godzilla versus King Kong, or are you going to a King Kong movie? If it's King Kong versus Godzilla.
Right. And that's the way to look at that. Yeah.
Yeah. And you always have the winner first, so to speak.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah.
I don't know. That's just me throwing that out there.
It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
We've got a year and a half-ish to go, and we will see them duke it out.
And we will probably
again.
talk about this again.
Oh, yeah. So,
Yeah.
well, right on. So,
I'm sure.
again, great movie for those of you listening who haven't seen it. You've heard us talk about it. It's a fun film more than anything else. There are negative things and positive things about it, but when it comes to the Godzilla movie, series, it's just a fun one. Enjoyable to watch if you can bear through the rough Kong suit. Just a good movie. So we definitely hope you guys have enjoyed it. Guys, have you got any final thoughts on this one?
For me, and I probably didn't say it, I did like the Godzilla suit in this one.
Oh, the Godzilla suit in this one is awesome.
That was a plus, yeah. And so I was so busy dogging King Kong, I reckon I forgot to do the plus on Godzilla.
Well, that suit's actually one of my favorites. I've always wanted a figure of that suit, but the only ones available are extremely expensive because I don't do the marmot colored weird ones. I want a high detailed one, and X Plus has one, but it's like almost $1,000 if you get it here. NECA just announced they will be releasing a figure of this suit, and that puts us in the $30 mark for a great looking figure. It will be mine because the suit's great. I love the suit in this movie. It was very different than the next one. The next one we got is Mothra versus Godzilla, and it's way more of a feline type face with that suit in comparison to this one, which was much more reptilian. But the Godzilla suit is a plus on this. And he went to 3 toes. This was also the first movie he went from 4 toes to 3 toes.
Did not know.
I didn't even notice that.
Yep. So, Ruben, what about you? Any final thoughts on it?
No, man, it's just a lot of fun. I recommend it, especially if you want to watch it with your kids. And it's a typical Japanese film, so the effects are going to be what the effects are for pictures of that time period, which to me is still good. You know?
Yeah.
But a lot of fun. before RJ was born, I watched it without any kids around. I just like it, but it is fun to watch with kids.
It's a blast. So, all right. Well, so that wraps it up for this episode of Monster Movie Stomp Down. Give this movie a shot. It's a blast. It's so much fun. We will be back again with the next Monster Movie Stomp Down next month for December. And that one, we go back and wrap up the Gamera trilogy with what many state as being the greatest giant monster film of all time, Gamera 3, Revenge of Eris, which is going to be absolutely phenomenal. I'm looking forward to this one. Mainly because I want to see what's his name is the homeless guy now. He's deteriorated to a homeless drunk. But
Yeah.
it's going to be an epic one, maybe a little bit more lengthy one because this movie does break into a lot of spiritual and philosophical angles to the movies or to this trilogy. Puts on a great spin, and of course, in my opinion, leaves us with the greatest cliffhanger of any giant monster movie and any movie period. So you don't want to miss this one coming up. So hope you guys enjoyed this, and we will sign off. This is Sludge.
It's Mark
And Ruben.
Y'all have a good night.
Good night.